the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity, tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come fi get it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come fi get it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners. Welcome, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, Dr. Thunder, to another episode of Getting Ish Done. How's it going there, Dr. Thunder?
I'm all right. How you doing, man?
I'm not bad. I am not bad at all. Every Wednesday, 9:30 p.m. 9:30 p.m. That's Eastern time. Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. Place to be. Would you say it's important to know yourself, Dr. Thunder? Know things about you?
You know, knowing thyself is probably the most important thing. Probably the most important journey to embark on. And it's also probably the most difficult thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very important and also very challenging.
Within the theme of this show, within the theme of what we talk about here, which is about getting things done, productivity, efficiency, effectiveness, and so on, you're going to find out that, relying upon yourself, right, you're going to be in many situations, is what I'm trying to say, where you have nothing but yourself to rely on. As a matter of fact, you're going to find out that you are going to be the most important ingredient, your ability to act, to will yourself to act, to make decisions, to pivot correctly, not to sabotage yourself, and so on and so forth, is going to be an integral part towards achieving anything, whether it's, planning a potluck or, going to the moon, right? Yeah. Have I said anything crazy so far?
No, you haven't. And there's something that people say in this space frequently when they're talking about relationships, and they tend to be pointing the finger at females that are complaining about the kind of men that they have, and there's no good man out here. And they're always quick to say, there's a common denominator, right? And the common denominator in any issues that you face is you. That's always the common denominator. It's always you. What is the saying? Wherever you go, there you are.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. So today we're going to be reviewing things you should know about yourself. So it happens to be 8 things. And I'm trying to get the right screen going here. So yes, I haven't seen this video. I certainly have not, Dr. Thunder. So it will be interesting to see what it's got going for itself here. But let me go ahead and start it. Go ahead and click that like button. Shout out to Nicer in the building. Shout out to Aaron B in the building. Click that subscribe button if you're not already. But share is the most important thing. Like and share. Let's get this going. Where is that?
To our channel.
All right. Are you there?
Uh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
What?
you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, we couldn't hear
Oh,
any of
so
that.
you didn't hear any of that?
No, it
What
it
the
it
hell?
did some
Okay,
it
so
did
it was
some
playing, but apparently it
it was
didn't
like it
come
was
through.
borging.
Let me try
So
playing it again.
yeah, go ahead.
All right.
Hey, Psych2Goers. Welcome to our channel.
It's
Your
still borging pretty bad.
Here now it's Borgin again.
You know.
Well, this is beautiful. Now, even if you were to share your screen, would it? I think as
Yeah,
long
I
as
mean,
it's
I
through
could do it.
my
I could do it. Let me 1 second. Let me find that real quick and see if that fixes our problem. Let's see.
Go ahead and find that link. Meanwhile, in the beginning here, what I've played twice now is they just introduced the notion of taking the time to introspect on your thoughts and your feelings so that you can have a sense of what you are, right? They didn't really say who you are because the whole kind of who thing is like already assumes that what you have like a set of characters you're going to choose from or something. But, just understanding the patterns of your thoughts and your feelings so that you get an idea of what that whole thing is. And so they were about to get in deeper into it. But
Okay, so I found it.
okay.
And let me see if it'll allow me to share my screen. So present. So I think you have to stop presenting.
Yeah, let me remove that stuff.
Okay, and then I'll share a screen and I'll okay. Now it's gonna make me okay, 1 second. Security and everything. Okay, hold up. Okay, let's see, where is it at? I don't see privacy. Where is it go? Where did it go? Let's ignore that. That's strange. Okay, well, it seems like it's okay. So I'm doing a tab. Let's see this right here. So share that. Did it share
Okay.
it? Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, there it is.
Little-
There we go. And let me turn the juice down a little bit. And let's try it. And then you can tell me if you can hear
Yeah.
it.
Hey, Psych2Goers. Welcome back to our channel.
Yeah, I hear that.
Thank you all so much for the love and support that you've given us. Your ongoing support has helped us make psychology and mental health more accessible to everyone. So thanks again. Now let's continue. Ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." But how many of us really take the time to reflect on our deepest thoughts, feelings, and experiences to get a good sense of who we are? Nowadays, life moves so fast, it sometimes feels like we don't even have time to breathe, much less take the time for introspection. But getting to know yourself and learning more about who you are as a person can actually do a lot to make you happier, resolve your inner conflicts, improve your relationships with others, and most of all, improve your relationship with yourself. So, here are 8 of the most important things you should
Just
know.
let me pause there for a second. Maybe I can kind of
Go ahead.
ask you what your general thoughts about things are so far. I think so far they've established that it's not an easy thing, or at least it's not common. They did mention quite clearly, well, how many of us take the time to go in there, introspect on the thoughts and feelings so that we can understand, right? We can get a pattern, we can see something there. So they've kind of set it up as first of all, it's fundamental, it's profound, it's important. They were dropping names, right? Like ancient philosopher Aristotle, whatever, right? They did all that, and they're saying, okay, well, it's important also for your health and well-being and good feelings and good vibes for everybody. What are your thoughts about that, Lane? I don't have any issues with it other than perhaps maybe a couple of comments, but what are your thoughts about how they've laid out the background so far?
Yeah, no, I don't have an issue with the sort of setup. I realize that you have to say things in a certain kind of way to get certain kind of people to watch it. And so some of the stuff like um, being happy, this is a key to being happy. This is a key to, you know, this kind of stuff. And the thing is, and I'm not, I'm not attempting to trivialize, being happy and treat it as though it's of no importance, but it's maybe not that important. Um, because happiness is not a particularly stable. Um, I think stuff like deep inner peace, um, purpose, meaning, you know, um, joy, depth of understanding, all of that kind of stuff that is way more important than happiness. But they're probably not going to frame it that way because happiness is a nice, kind of small
Yes, yes.
talk way to kind of enter the
Yep.
discussion. So
The
I
best,
think
yeah. The best in for your small talk, for your cotton candy, right? You gotta. So, however, something about what you said there just kind of got me thinking because ultimately, I'm thinking that there's a very important aspect of this where it's like, well, know thyself so that you can know thyself, right?
yep.
It's not, and it is in the doing and all that kind of stuff, all the obvious things that I'm saying, right? Um, and I think that is the final resting spot. Every other spot in between there and calling it happiness, it's just kind of a way of kind of getting more a finer resolution, better nuance. But ultimately, I would say, um, just pragmatically speaking, argument right here is that you know yourself, so you know yourself. It's one of those kind of things that it's like it's kind of it's kind of like the point. It's intrinsically good, whatever. Anyways,
Yeah, Bob nails it in the chat. He says it's more marketable for the normie.
well, there you go, and shout out to Bob. How's it going there, Bob? And, how's that bookkeeping coming along? But yeah, you could go ahead, Duck Thunder.
All right, here goes number one.
Number 1. What makes you happy? One of the most rewarding things you can learn about yourself is what makes you happy. But you might rarely ever take the time to reflect on it. And although asking yourself this can seem like such a loaded question, being honest about what you're most passionate about and who you enjoy spending time with is crucial to finding your purpose in life and nurturing your mental and emotional well-being. Finding your happiness, even if it's just in the little, everyday things, can do so much to improve the quality of your life and help you realize what you should and shouldn't prioritize.
Okay. I think that I know that even modern psychology and all that kind of stuff is well aware of the importance of awareness, right? So really, I mean, I think it's quite obvious that most of what is going to be done here is to give you exercises to become self-aware. It's not about knowing what makes you happy. It's about paying attention to yourself, right?
Yeah.
So, and even when she's saying it, it's kind of clear, like, noticing the different kinds of things so you can begin to understand the shifts, the subtleties about yourself, right? Paying attention to what makes you happy. It's an easy entry point, again, to Bob's point, and to, for the palatableness of the normie and for the general consumption for broadcasting purposes. If you're going to train somebody's mind towards introspection, perhaps the easiest way is to ask them, hey, look inward and see what makes you happy. I mean, you don't want to go straight to the black pill death abyss right away, right? I mean, you can't go straight there. But I don't know. What are your thoughts about that? Because I generally speaking, I agree with what you said about the happiness thing so far. But I think as far as a good exercise for paying attention, which they set this whole thing up as, they were like, okay, you paying attention inwardly about your thoughts and your feelings to get a sense of yourself, and it's important, blah blah blah. And then now they're telling you to look inward. Do you think so far it's a good exercise? Any kind of criticisms? Because I think it's a good kind of exercise actually. If people will actually, if at least stop for a few minutes and pay attention to something, even if it's quote unquote what makes them happy.
Yeah, I think perhaps noticing a sense of fulfillment or peace when you engage in certain activities. Uh, yeah, I mean that's definitely worth noting, and then you'd want to try to do that as much as you can. You try to replicate that as much as you can, and it seems to me that in a much deeper sense than just you know chasing around the next sort of flavor of the month, what's going to give you that sort of titillation. This is really more about, though they use a terminology that don't really I don't really care for. Um, it does seem like the purpose of it is to try to get you to think a little bit more about what sort of makes you tick. And if you can figure out what makes you tick, and then you can kind of, okay, let me do more of that. It's really kind of a simple thing. Let me try to situate my life in a way that allows me to do that more or do that the most,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And you're not going to run with regards to getting things done, right? If we were to if I were to just put things into more like a mechanistic plus also getting things done perspective, a lot of times people get in their way or ask questions regarding being fulfilled in what they're doing, knowing what to do, or whether it's fulfilling them, blah blah blah. And in a practical sense, you just said, for example, look at what makes you happy, what makes you tick, if you will, and then move in that direction. Then you're less likely to be running into that issue, right? Practically speaking. And um, the sorting mechanism that I often refer to, that I in terms of, it seems like there is a directedness towards, like, so the question is, what is to be done, what is the good, the ethical question, right? The question of ethics. How then shall we live, right? And shout out to Jordan Peterson, and I call it this kind of sorting mechanism. It's not as super complex a question as people might think. Now it's in the details really, but there's this great sorting in terms of, if you just start with, okay, what is some limited definition of the good for me, and then in the future and include other people. In other words, the more you add these, shall we say, uh, expand the parameters, right, into the future and across the group, it starts to narrow the possible options of what you should do, right?
Yeah.
It really starts to, it's not that complicated. So in this kind of sense too, looking inwards, seeing what makes you tick, has that kind of power as well. It really just then starts pulling you in towards the right directions. It's not going to answer the ultimate question of the what is the good. That's where Sam Harris makes a mistake, where he thinks that this sort of, that we can, oh no, then we can just keep on going forward and find the good, right? It's like, no. But it's a great sorting mechanism. It's common. It's kind of base level, almost base level natural law type stuff here. It doesn't take you all the way there. But anyways, now I've kind of slightly derailed the conversation. I was just saying basically that this kind of looking within does kind of offer the same kind of that sorting mechanism for you, so you can move towards the right direction, as that you were referring to.
Yeah, and I mean, so getting this sort of simple thing figured out will have the effect of unraveling a great deal of complexity. Because if you don't have the simple thing together, then that which is complex is not just more complex, it's also confusing, because you don't understand the sort of fundamental, you don't understand anything about the way that the thing is designed, how it's made. But once you understand this really kind of simple principle and you really master that principle, then everything else starts to seem less convoluted and mushy.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, I guess we can see what number 2 is.
All right, here we go.
Number 2, your core values. Do you think honesty matters more than sensitivity? What about hard work versus resourcefulness? Or ambition versus loyalty? Would you prefer others to be more open-minded or more traditional? What about community versus self-interest or freedom versus loyalty? Knowing what ideas, virtues, or principles you value the most is crucial for not only your understanding more about who you are as a person, but also what you want from your relationships. Your core values are the ideas you want to uphold, and they give your life meaning and direction when you need to make a difficult decision or when stuck in times of strife.
This is actually a really deep point here. What do you think?
Why you go on?
Well, okay, so we could almost do a whole episode just on these things that she delineates. She talks about, let's see here. Let's go back here.
Do you think honesty matters more than sensitivity?
So that one right there. And of course, I think honesty is more important. But there are those that really the answer to them is sensitivity, but they don't want to say sensitivity because then it'll seem like they're dishonest or something.
I wanted to. Yeah. So after she said all those things that she said, and it cuts one aspect cut across. Let me just go to the end. Empathy is what came to mind. In other words, if this is practiced correctly, not only will you know yourself with regards to these kind of personality traits, these value-based, or this kind of personality. Again, shout out to Jordan Peterson. Kind of brought to the fore the aspects of personality that correlate with certain values, what we call values, especially within the political landscape, right? That given certain personalities, there's certain proclivities. It's not that crazy. Some people are going to be more willing to explore and others are going to be more willing to batten down the hatches and stuff like that. And this is going to be expressed in how they make decisions, right? Which is what your values in a certain sense are. These values are a sorting, a way of choosing. Okay. Well, in this case, as you mentioned, honesty versus sensitivity. Well, you're gonna pick honesty. Honesty wins because it's higher up in the hierarchy of values. But ultimately, you're gonna have a certain amount of empathy when you know that, hey, this person is a sensitivity person. Sensitivity might be not the best way to steel man their position, but basically, it is a kind of like a community, kind of a well-being, making sure everybody feels fairly heard and all that kind of stuff, right? Which perhaps honesty can undercut sometimes. You don't just say everything everywhere, right? Right? That's common sense that you don't say everything everywhere just because it's true, right? So some people, so these kinds of things, not only will you know yourself, but you will also know other people. But yeah, I get your point that yes, she meant as she goes through, there are many things that we can kind of touch on. But what do you think about I think this is a more difficult task. What do you think? In terms of, because now not only are you asking people to just look at their emotions, right? Look at feelings, look at, oh, what gets them going, what makes them tick. But now you're asking them to discern certain values, and kind of this seems a little more difficult, no?
Yeah, no, this is a very this one would this category could be one that took several years to even kind of get anywhere. um, this is like the never-ending journey, this one. But I like the way that you put it though, like all of these sort of dichotomies she draws as a way to, you know, figure out how you need to interact with people that they value this over that, you know. That's interesting. And part of that is sort of at the heart of um, just communication. Part of the breakdown with communication is you could you you mean a particular thing, but the other person can't hear that because the way you communicated that thing sort of doesn't take into account certain sensitivities that they may have associated with that topic, So if you sort of bull in a china shop over that stuff, but then you're still trying to be clear saying this other thing, then you're not going to get anywhere. But if you have an idea of where people, how they like to receive information, that kind of a thing, then it could be positive. I'll just play the rest of this again.
What about hard work versus resourcefulness?
Hard work versus resourcefulness. What do you think of that? Do you think, is that a real dichotomy? Is that harder versus smarter
You know,
thing?
whenever they use words like resourceful or industrious, I always just wonder if it's not just a combination of lower order, simpler to understand, more elemental points such as hard work, right? So hard work or something like speed, for example, something like that, right? Those are simple, elemental, as you understand. When you start saying industrious and resourceful, seems like, well, okay, sounds like the right kind of combination of hard work and speed and blah 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 blah, right? It's similar to kind of like a wisdom intelligence type situation as well. So I don't think this is definitely a dichotomy. However, though, because I think this particular point here, perhaps it's not necessarily intended to be a dichotomy, but it's a way of kind of just thinking about what you kind of prefer. So
Mhm.
what I mean by prefer, I mean you have what you call the grinder, let's say. Okay. Now the grinder works hard. Are they also resourceful? Yes. The other guy, whom they call a sniper, he works hard and he's also resourceful. Okay. So that we just kind of make everything kind of like, okay, well then why, but still, right? We call one a grinder, brawler, and another one a sniper, right? And overall, one would maybe put the whole kind of resourceful working smart type on the sniper side of things, okay,
Mhm.
than on the grinder side of things. And I think that you should definitely know where you're in, um, and not because you don't value resourcefulness and or hard work either, or you're gonna need both in either case, right? It's just being applied in a different way. But I think it's important to know grinder versus sniper. What do you think?
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. Um, let's see here. Right, where sniper is, you're going to tend to focus in on one thing and be surgical about how you approach it. So there's probably more setup time. Uh, the grinder is just kind of getting in there and just wherever, it's messy, it's sloppy, but you're getting stuff done. You keep applying pressure, and eventually it breaks, kind of a thing. Yeah, I mean, I think understanding the difference is critical. Yeah. Let's see here. Let's play a couple more of these.
Or ambition versus loyalty. Which
Okay, ambition versus loyalty. Again, these are not mutually exclusive categories.
Yeah, definitely not mutually exclusive. I want to, if there's anything that, so I would turn towards the loyalty thing, and I will now just recall to myself that it's a particular virtue that I never quite understood.
Mm,
I just kind of see it as what does it really mean? Fealty, what does it really mean? Okay. Is it because typically, okay, what's the other extreme? The other extreme is like, oh, everything's transactional, let's say, right?
yeah.
And I would say even loyal, and I would say, look, that is true. Even loyalty is supposed to be a transactional thing, because loyalty is
Yeah.
not supposed to be to everybody, right?
Right.
So there is something transactional about it. So, but the question is, what is being traded? Okay, what is
Right.
being traded? Typically, let's say if on the one end you have things such as hard cash, hard currency, I give you $10, right? You give me a book. On the other end, we have something that's more akin to favors, right? And or some kind of, you get what I'm saying. It's not, it's hard to quantify. So loyalty is a transaction that tends to be less or more on the hard to quantify trading going on. But there is trading. I just my I don't like when people try to get one over. So it's like, okay, we're trading, but you're acting like we're not trading because you make everything so low resolution, and you're trying to get, it's trying to get one over you with this loyalty stuff. It's just my feeling it has always been. And you wouldn't be surprised that I feel that way, given how I think about, that type of stuff about feelings and groups, right? But what are your thoughts about the loyalty question? Now it's yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that the concepts are actually they're pretty intertwined, because okay, so one thing that I have I don't know, expressed my uh, expressed my what am I want to say, my displeasure with, is I often I you know I you know I I'm in the business of employing people, and it's anywhere from short term, like just on a gig, to stuff that's pretty long term. And I have facilitated many opportunities, hundreds of opportunities, for hundreds or maybe even thousands at this point of people. Okay. And something that I have noted is that there are very few people, of the people that I have facilitated things for, that have reciprocated. Very few. Now, some of them can't reciprocate because they don't have access. They don't have the ability. They don't have anything to reciprocate. But many do have the opportunity to reciprocate, and they don't. Now, maybe they don't reciprocate because they're still paying some other folks back, and they haven't caught up to reciprocating to me yet, because, you know, they're pretty far down on the list. I'm pretty far down on the list. But this is something that I have noticed, and I see that as a lack of loyalty. But really, my issue with it is, it seems that they are violating at least a sort of understood aspect of a transaction to take place. I do things for you, you do things for me. If you don't do things for me, why should I do things for you? Right? We're not talking about family members. We're not talking about people that I'm responsible for. We're talking about people that I do things for. I provide them opportunities, and the sort of standard fare, the expectation is that when they have the opportunity, they will return the favor. And often they do not.
I like what you're saying here, and you say that you. So ultimately, you are landing in the position of what you don't like about them is, or what you don't like that they're doing is, it's not good business practice, economy practice, good in this kind of world of interaction and exchange. This is you're being a bum, right?
Yeah.
That's what you don't like about them.
They're reaping
because
where
we-
they don't sow.
yeah, and as a libertarian, right, you know about the voluntary, because my whole point, right, was kind of coming from like a, it's almost Ayn Rand, like what I started out before about this kind of loyalty business. And I talked about transactions. And I said that, look, ultimately, it's best when people, the more voluntary something is, again, this is just, and that's why I say as possible, as voluntary as possible. You don't have to be an extremist like myself that likes to kind of have everything very starkly, at least to me, see them in a very starkly motivations and everything. I want it to be kind of clear. At least I want to see it clearly. The idea is the more voluntary it is, as opposed to if it's an unspoken rule whereby you expected them, in other words, they violated though an unspoken rule, right? And that's the issue sometimes with unspoken rules, right? Especially and a lot of unspoken rules and it- taking advantage goes on in that whole loyalty space, right? It's just a way of just make things murky, not define things, and then make it. And who tends to win there? It's people whom are not, to just put it in a very basic, low level way. People whom are not as productive tend to win over there. Okay, in the land of I'll take advantage of you through this whole loyalty game thing, right?
Right.
Because they can be leeches and so on and so forth, right? So in the crazy extreme Ayn Rand world, they'll be like, well, then everything needs to be perfectly kind of voluntary, blah, blah. But no, human beings are not robots. But I think that even for me, and I like all that voluntary stuff, but that's why I like for people to be generally to be maximally aware, at least the people that I deal with, and the self-aware, apropos to this particular topic that we're having right now, right?
I mean, just
Yeah.
and consider this. So you and I have been collaborating in this way for what, something like 3 years now? Well, yeah, it's coming up on, if it isn't 3 years, it's coming up on 3 years.
Mhm.
Right? Because
Yeah.
yeah. So now say for instance, if I hit the long ball and my space just totally blows up, and that's the end of our collaboration. That seems to me to be a lack of loyalty. Now, it would be one thing if you were you know, if I was Allen Iverson and you were some of the hooligans that I grew up with.
Oh, but yeah. So collaboration on YouTube, that might actually happen and it might actually be justified. What I mean by that is if you blew up and your YouTube program became a particular type of thing, your whole YouTube endeavor, then it actually might be the case that we no longer collaborate, right? Because there is some, and and it will be understood. You see, the
Well,
loyalty thing.
but let's say let's make it more particular though.
Mhm.
Let's say I start doing a bunch of collaborations with we'll say the key to my success is say I interview Jordan Peterson, and then I find myself in that sort of
Over there in that
right.
area.
But then I'm like, nah, I don't need to deal with Ike anymore.
Yeah, that would be kind of weird. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Um,
So that's a problem. But a lot of people they do that. Now, I think sometimes they think they do that because they're not trying to be Allen Iverson. But in fact, they're just um they're just not loyal. You know, they were using the situation for what it was, and when it's over, they don't feel any there's no tug. There's no like, I should think about this person that I dealt with. This person would be perfect for this. They just scrub their memory, you know. Um and that's like a again, the breakdown for me is the lack of reciprocation. It's like, you know, I do something for you, you do something for me. Now something's happening for me. That's kind of why you did something for me in the first place. You do stuff for folks that are around where you're at. You're collaborating with people. Nobody gets anywhere if one of you makes it and nobody else gets a chance after that. You know, you can't bring stuff up. You can't collectively bring things up. The stories that I always enjoy are the ones where, and for good reason, again, not Allen Iverson trying to bring up, you know, these dudes that were, you know, holding him back. Not that scenario. But I always like the scenario where, like, a group of folks, they come up together and they're all high functioning and it makes total sense why they would continue to collaborate, right? But it's my sense of things also that the reason that we don't see that more is because for whatever reason, when they hit it big or whatever it is, they just don't I it's my sense that disproportionately they just decide they're just going to go it on their own. They don't need anybody.
they don't just and the majority of those types of people don't make it. Now, if I want to kind of quantify things a little bit, and you kind of break down whatever distribution I'm talking about in terms of types of people, there is obviously there's the Michael Jordans out there, and these are like, in other words, because there's a personality aspect. Number one, they're already elite, so they're kind of like a very small fraction, and then they also have this weird personality, right? So they're just like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction, right? And they can play a particular "I don't need nobody" hand, and somehow they make it, you know. Okay.
Right.
Uh, but there's a vast majority of mediocre people. Now you forget the elite. Now we just go back to towards the middle of the bell curve, whom fail because of their inability to do this correct sewing, correct reciprocity games over time. And I like to talk about how I'm, in a certain sense, it would seem kind of cold and calculated about it. I'm half joking in the sense that it is true that I'm cold and calculated about it, but that's depending on if you think that cold and calculated means that I'm some kind of a monster. These two things, cold and calculated doesn't mean monster, right? I just like to be aware of that. I am. So when I reach out to somebody, for example, and I did it recently, like it's like, okay, I called this guy, or like, and I texted him up, because I know he's the kind of guy that would appreciate that, and I kind of got a hint that that's something. Okay, cool, let me do that. That was cold and calculated, but does it mean that I'm an uncaring bastard? No. My normal way would be to not to text him. So it was a cold calculation to text him, right? Because I care about at least continue to cultivate that relationship, right? So these things, when people don't play them right, to my whole point about the mediocre, a huge part of why people tend not to succeed, and sometimes a lot of these mediocre people might get an opportunity like what you're mentioning, right? And then they don't bring you along, and you're not the only kind of person they're doing this with, right? So you find that they hit a glass ceiling very quickly. They're not able to. Anyways, you already know.
Yeah, sometimes people they want people to think that that they're special. They're the special one. They're the unusual. They can do it themselves. They're just that good. Whatever it is, And often is the case that what makes people good is the people that they're collaborating with. They have like a certain chemistry, a certain thing, and that's what worked. But when they get the call, it's like, well, they don't want you. They want me. So,
well, Dr. Thorne, let me pose a problem for you though, in terms of because people there's the other thing that tends to happen in this case where somebody thinks that they're better than they actually are, right? In the music world, I'm sure you guys have memes, okay, about this cat, right? This cat, and then you don't invite him to whatever, and then he's like, oh my God. And so that there is that problem out there, right? Where it's like, it's not a loyalty thing or me not being loyal, that's why I didn't bring you along, dude. But it's like, and I guess you already mentioned it as an Allen Iverson scenario. But the Iverson scenario is kind of like a Stark thing where they're obviously losers and he's obviously cool. But you have these people who are proximity, but and they think they're killer with the sacks, but
right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a yeah. You want me to
No, I mean, you don't have to say anything about it. I just wanted to point out that there is that thing to watch out for when you talk about all this loyalty stuff. Some of these people are out there saying, yeah, that guy didn't give me a whatever. I'm saying, hey, you suck, right? You need to check it. Like, you might be sucking. That's why people are not inviting you. It's not like, oh, they're not. It's like, dude, maybe you're not as good as you think you are. Because a lot of times these people you're just kind of not self-aware about it, and you're just kind of like, you've almost told them explicitly, somehow, some way, not in so many words. They still just can't get it.
Right. All right, let's see if there's a couple of these other ones.
Do you prefer others to be more open-minded or more traditional?
So open-minded and more traditional. So modern versus traditional.
What about community versus self-interest or freedom versus loyalty?
Okay, so there's the freedom versus loyalty thing. And then the community versus self-interest. That's one that gets actually talked about quite a bit in this space. Community versus self-interest.
Go
ahead.
The community versus self-interest plus the loyalty one. A couple of these are kind of reflections of a particular general kind of symmetry that goes on in terms of human beings. What I wanted to, it was one that the traditional versus open-minded.
Yeah.
That one, it can take a certain depth and nuance where now granted, we've already said that all these are pretty difficult things to do, and they're nice if you're able to get this level of introspection and whatnot. But the traditional, if I were to just to make a comment on that, is that she mentioned, do you prefer others to be traditional or open-minded, which is like an interesting way to put it, right? Now, I've actually never thought about how I prefer others to be, because I think, let's say, like, for example, if I'm gonna get married to somebody, which I am married, right? uh, I prefer them to be traditional, right? Um, I am the open-minded one. Now, however, though, my open-mindedness leads me to conclusions which, if you were to look from the outside, you just come from Mars, like, oh, he lives a traditional life. But there's the subtleties in how the path to get there through, quote unquote, an open mind, rather than a traditional or even traditionalist perspective, right? But I noticed that they mentioned how you want others to be, and I want you to answer that, right? And in certain senses, I don't. It's because I don't. Anyways, in certain senses, especially with, like, again, if my wife is going to be more on the traditional side of
Right.
things than me, whereby than me is, I think, is the important aspect, because they might not be as traditional compared to other people, right? But I don't want anybody even close to me traditional, because I mean, close to me open-minded wise, 'cause I don't trust. Maybe let me not go too deep into the psychoanalysis. But go ahead. How would you prefer others to be?
You don't trust yourself, Hike?
No,
Oh no.
yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Um, um, it's okay if I'm open-minded. It's not okay if you're open-minded. No, I'm just anyhow. It's interesting. I don't think I care what other people are like. It's interesting to me when they're different from me.
Mhm.
That's a certain kind of, sort of puzzle to solve. Um, I think I prefer people that I have the sort of closest interactions with. They may not be what you'd call traditionalists, but they have traditional values.
Mhm.
They tend to have traditional values. Um, my wife has traditional values, but in a sense, she's more adventurous and um, open-minded is not exactly the way I describe it. I have a challenge with the term open-minded because open to what, you know? What are we saying? Because even people that say they're open-minded, you could find things that they're not actually open to. Um, so I prefer active and passive. So active-minded would be what we're calling open, and passive would be what we would call closed. So
Mhm.
active meaning that you experience new things and it actually has an impact on your perception of reality.
And you interact with it,
Right.
um, and which includes challenging. In other words, perhaps more than a traditional person would do, will be challenging whatever they interact with in terms of, like, certain norms. They'll be more
Right.
likely to challenge and to try to find out why that fence is there, the famous fence, right? And than the traditionalists might end up in the same conclusion that, hey, like I'm saying, like, I might find out, like, hey, I'm going to do the same thing that the traditionalist says regarding the fence, right? But I'm definitely questioning the hell out of that fence. Right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because especially as you frame it that way, I'm not really a traditionalist then. I
Mhm.
always I always I always frame myself as a traditionalist. I describe myself to other people as being a traditionalist because I think that's the easiest way for them to understand, like get it, the stuff that they need to understand about me to interact with me in a positive way, right? Um, but I question all of that stuff. I I'm constantly questioning stuff. I mean, that I did a replay of that was the Bible plagiarized case
Mm.
closed that we did on your channel. I replayed that on my channel on it was Thursday. I think it was this past Thursday, last week Thursday. And I was listening to, listening back to it and just kind of remembering, and Dana's saying her usual kind of inflammatory stuff and stirring the pot and commenting on stuff sometimes that's not really what was being said, but it keeps it interesting. And I was thinking of my response, which was pretty calculated. The the cosmological argument for the existence of God, the questions about the formation in the New Testament, canon of Scripture, all all of that kind of stuff. Like, I suppose if I was a true traditionalist, I probably wouldn't get that far. Maybe I would have already just bought whatever the tradition was, and that would have been enough. But I think maybe perhaps digging further and asking certain kinds of questions, which when I was a kid asking these questions, I think they saw me as being a rebel or being defiant or something. And really, I just wanted to understand how it worked.
I mean, you shifted to orthodoxy,
Right.
That's not a traditionalist.
So there is that. So yeah, so it's interesting. So in that sense, I think my wife is more of a traditionalist than I am. But I think that people would likely not describe they would not describe me as the quote unquote open-minded one, and would probably not describe her as the traditional one, which I think is actually the case. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's there's always it's one of those cases where there's a clear internal versus external play, and if you want to go in there, and it's a good kind of I guess a good fodder for introspection here, which was given as a good fodder for introspection, right? You really go in there and kind of see like, how am I arriving at these things, these values, right? These things that I prefer, things that I want, that I seek out to be and to recreate and to see more in the world. How am I actually getting there? Is it by a certain kind of acceptance, or yeah, because there's a lot of traditionalists and non-traditionalists in the monastery. Probably more there are probably more non-traditionalists in the monastery than in general population.
Probably because that's
I mean,
that's a
St.
pretty
Thomas Aquinas was a weirdo, obviously. I mean, come on. It's like, well,
right. Somebody, I think it was Bob actually. Bob from the chat here in my talk this morning, because I was talking about what was I talking about? I was talking about why black men think that the church is the same as the streets with respect to conduct, behavior of people that are participants in the church versus participants in the streets. And he made a comment in the chat about finding it perhaps immoral to bring children into the world if they're going to basically be condemned to hell, because humanity is not really compatible with Christianity, in a certain kind of way, as far as like actually becoming a good person given the context, given the climate that we're in and all that. But in my comment to him was about becoming a monastic. Say, hey, you could always become a monastic, find your monastery and live out your life praying for the church, praying for others, and working out your salvation with fear and trembling. Simple life, right? So that is one of the traditions in the church. That is not it's not discussed at all in a modern Christian context. I think most modern Christians would take that to be some sort of cop out. Or
They would take it to
you're
be,
just trying to run away from.
okay, interesting.
What
Yeah,
is-
and after all, the Protestant ethic, right? You should be out there working, and how dare you? Okay, that's one aspect, and then there's another aspect of the introspection, right? The going inward, which is not kind of that meditative contemplative, I guess would be the word used on that. Not
stuff like
not meditation, but
hesychasm.
contemplative, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the stuff like hesychasm and
Mhm.
asceticism and
It-
all of that kind of
I
stuff.
think it's the Christianity. It's a funny thing. There's an uncanny valley in between what typically gets said and the hesychasm that you're talking about. Like like the uncanny valley tends to be because as you start going inward, which would be a kind of like a going inward. The uncanny valley where all kinds of blasphemies and atrocities happen is Joel Osteen, right? Like it's like I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying that is like there's these peak whatever to go to the other peak. Someone thinks they're moving in that direction, but you end up in pop psychology land. But really, you're Anyways, that just
Yeah,
came to mind.
look, it turns out that everything really is about depth versus breadth. It's surface level on a lot of stuff, or it's deep in one thing. That's really what everything is. That's what everything is. You have to choose. You got to choose one. Well, actually, no. Actually, it's not that you have to choose one. If you're choosing, then you're choosing depth. Everyone else is just not choosing anything. They're just like, hey, we're doing all of this. Hey. Oh, goodness. All right, let's see what else here.
Knowing what ideas, virtues, or principles you value the most is crucial.
Okay.
Number 3,
here we go.
how you respond to stress. Are you calm under pressure or panicky and anxious? Do you usually run away from conflict or face it head on? Knowing your go-to stress response is key to succeeding in difficult and demanding situations. Responding to stress in an unhealthy way, like denying all of your problems or procrastinating until the very last minute, holds you back from achieving your goals by trapping you in a dysfunctional pattern of behavior. When you're more aware of how you react in a stressful situation, you're better able to manage your anxiety, avoid the pitfalls of these unhealthy coping mechanisms, and stay resilient, even amidst emotional distress.
One thing that came to mind is that I tend to be calm when the S hits the fan.
Yeah.
It's more like, okay, it's already happened. I think that I may freak out a little bit more than average before the S hits the fan. I may not show it or say anything about it, or it may not cause my behavior to change. But that is more the side I have to deal with. I have to deal with more anticipation type anxiety than in the moment acute anxiety. When the S hits the fan, it's like, oh, what? Okay, I'm in the zone. I'm breathing. I'm there, right? But before, or who knows what may happen? I think I'm less okay with uncertainty. And again, it's not like it's dilapidating. Just more. That's the part I have to deal with more than acute crazy situation. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that side?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely experience anxiety, and this is something that I've discussed, and that I'm transparent about. I tell people this all the time. I get nervous. I have anxiety. You know, um, you know, and it seems to be proportionate to my perception of the magnitude of whatever it is that I'm doing. So, and this is interesting because perhaps things that other people would be a lot more anxious about, I won't, because it's not about the number of people watching. That's never been the thing. It's it's usually about some internal um hierarchy that I've developed. You know, it's something it has to do with what I consider to be the most important things, what sort of challenge I presented to myself, and am I going to be able to meet that or not? You know, it tends to be that, and not the other stuff, not the sort of, well, there are 100,000 people watching, or there are X, Y, and Z. I mean, I'm sure I'll be somewhat anxious about certain kinds of things, perhaps because the cameras are on or whatever. But really, it's really more about um, what I think it means, you know. And I noticed this. I was 14 years old, and I opened for Ray Charles on the Michigan Festival, and the audience for this had to be 100,000 people. It was ridiculous. It was so many people. I never seen. I mean, it's Ray Charles, right? Um, and I remember playing that gig and not really being, particularly anxious, right? Fast forward, and this is after many more years of high pressure, high intensity sort of performances. And, you know, after I hadn't been playing classical saxophone for about 14 years and I went back to school to get my doctorate, I remember the first performance that I did, the first performance, and it was in front of a bunch of saxophone players, right? That I did. And I was incredibly anxious, incredibly anxious, right? So it's very interesting what stuff will tend to make you anxious. And of course, when I asked my wife to marry me, I proposed, and I had this thing all worked out and everything. I surprised her at one of her rehearsals. I had some other people that I knew participated, in the whole thing. I played a song for her, like this. I had all this stuff worked out. It was all poetic and stuff. I had this thing on my phone. I read this little thing that I said to her out of my phone, which was the thing. And I was incredibly nervous, but other stuff just hasn't, it just depends on if it's important to me or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fact that if it didn't catch you unawares, it wouldn't be actual nervousness sometimes, right? I mean, it's like
No.
sometimes you're like, why am I? In other words, the magnitudes tends to have a logic of its own. Sometimes you're just like, okay, why is this particular instance so acute or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Interesting thing there, but yeah, I didn't have anything else to add on that point.
One thing that they said. Hold up here. Let me back it up. Let's see here. What was it? Oh, the conflict thing. You know, are you a person that takes stuff head on, or are you a
Oh yeah,
person
that's
that?
a
What-
ah, you- okay. I don't think you want to. I believe you had something to say about that, but it's so I am 100% like it's funny. On a particular level, I take things very head on. And when I say on a particular level, it could be on the level of, let's say, we're actually having a conversation. And if you ask me what I think about something or my position or criticisms or whatever, I'm very blunt about it. Um, However, I tend not to actually cause or have friction as much with people. Okay. Um, and that's because when it comes to on that other level, once it leaves the arena of certain kind of logic, which if it starts to affect this other arena, which is the arena of people's feelings or whatever, what I may consider to be critical aspects of their feelings, because most of the aspects of their feelings I don't care about. Critical aspects of the feelings for reasons which I care about, for some broader purpose of some kind of broader harmony, I would not let the logic. I would present my logical statements in a particular way so it doesn't affect that. And then on this whole realm of feelings, I tend to play more behind the scenes. Uh, I've said before that I kind of in the social world, I'm kind of like a spider. I'm a spider and I have all these webs. I'm kind of paying attention to all the vibrations that's going on, but with a very light touch when it comes to this whole conflict confrontation thing. Again, I'm not a shrinking violet when it comes to you knowing who I am, exactly what I think about stuff. Um, but somehow, I, simultaneously, avoiding conflict is something that I think I've kind of. So I'm definitely on that, not going in to go cause conflict type. I find it to be very inefficient and kind of crazy. Um, for example, and I would like to see what you say about it because what I've noticed is you actually perhaps you want to respond to people more than than even me. Like I tend to now I'll respond to them again on a on if I on a certain level. Once I see that it's going at a certain place, I tend to ignore. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you said something to me. Uh, so we did that case closed, the plagiarized Bible thing, and you noted something about Dana's disposition when I sort of delineated the Kalam cosmological argument for the existence of God and some other details, right? Where you were actually surprised that it seemed to actually have an effect.
Yeah. I was like, wow, you actually. It's rare that I go ahead.
um, and the thing is it's interesting. Um, I've really I've changed my perspective on the whole proselytizing thing. So initially, and this is 19, 20, I'm very young, very inexperienced, didn't know a whole lot. I felt a sort of burning urge, though I'm an introvert, though, you know, cold approach and all of that is not ain't my thing. None of the sales stuff, none of that. That's just, I mean, I can make myself do it, but I pay for it, you know. Um, so, but me and a buddy of mine, and actually, it's Two Dads React. It's God Rules. We started talking to people on uh, on a college campus, and we would just basically walk up to folks. They were walking by us, and we would say, "What do you think about the Bible?" And then we would just start talking. And honestly, a lot of the knowledge that I have, it really started on those sort of topics. It really started because I didn't know anything, and I better start figuring something out, or else I'm not going to have anything to talk to people about.
Hmm. Got it.
And so, now I went from that, which is like, way over on one side of the whole spectrum, all the way to I'm not going to say anything to you unless you ask me a specific question. Right? Now, I may perceive a question or someone is ready to have a conversation, and so then, I'm informed. I know what I'm talking about. I can say something that actually could be impactful. But I think that it works best you don't when you don't um you're not pushy. You're not volunteering any information. You're not like, you know, what is it? What is the thing? What is the kind of person? What is their feelings on their sleeve or something? Whatever that thing is. You're not that person that it's too easy to get you to spill the beans. You can't be that person. You know, if if you have the knowledge, but you actually hold the knowledge like it's actually valuable, and only are willing to share if someone actually asks the right question, then I think it just changes the dynamic. It's a totally different ball game. So I think the calculus, and I can see the perspective of basically just not believing that that kind of discourse would have any, that kind of rhetoric, that kind of interaction would have any impact. I totally get that perspective. But I think that the sort of X factor is that it really is the approach. It really is, you have to wait for them to say, "Okay, I'm ready for this," or else it has no impact, and then it's just wasted.
So it's probably the last one.
Yeah, let's do what is he? Yeah, so let's do number 4, and then that will be, I think that'll be the last one for today, and then we'll do the next 4 next week.
Number 4, your physical health. When you take care of your body, you make it easier for yourself to manage stress and fight against the symptoms of anxiety, depression, and fatigue. So it's important that you know what illnesses and medical conditions you may have and treat them as soon as possible to avoid further complications. For example, when left untreated, hyperthyroidism can actually lead to developing depression. So the more you know about your physical health, the better off you'll be mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, this is kind of the softball one. But what do you think? Obviously, physical health is very important, and it can change your perspective on reality. Because if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. It's that saying. What do you think?
Let me see if I can actually. Let me see if they actually stuck to, because this whole thing is about getting to know yourself. Okay, cool. And then they just kind of said, okay, know your body. I guess. Okay, fine. Okay, great. It is the freebie. It is the softball. It is the well, duh, and it is probably, but it's also not easy in the
Right,
sense
right.
that we talked about them mentioning the difficulty in terms of introspection. The average person tends not to be very introspective, sit down and look inwards. but also this physical activity in terms of, going out there and having the discipline to, well, they didn't say physical, they just said knowing your body, knowing your mental, how your body works. And I immediately started thinking about, well, if you're going to know your body, you have to use your body, or you're observing your body, right? So
Yeah.
the observing, that's pretty hard, because it's like observing your mind too. So knowing, that means, okay, you're experimenting a little bit, you're eating different things, you're understanding your hydration and all this other kind of stuff, right? And I think that is an equally valid entry point. Now, you have yoga, for example, and then you have like Zen meditations, right? And these things, one concentrates on the body, the other is more concentrating on mental activity. Now, these are both ways of practicing the meditative practice, right? Ways of developing your concentration and your equanimity and knowing yourself, right?
Hmm.
But the physical one, and it is 100% true. Anybody who does, like, does physical stuff, and wants to be at the peak, they get the same kind of experiences of, being in the zone, and how to kind of have a lot of balance and equanimity, and only take the shot when you're breathing out, whether you're a sniper or a free throw person, right? These types of things, the same kinds of insights you'll get about, the zone and yourself, if you're sitting there and doing Zen type meditation, or if you're stretching your body, or even doing a David Goggins type run, right? These are all, or shall I say both, because I'm just explaining from two ends. So if I were to expand, expand this idea of knowing your body, I would just expand it up to the level of, look, it is an equally valid entry point. As a matter of fact, I'm more of a body type person when it comes to the meditation thing. Um, in a certain sense, especially the way that I like to break it down and see it. Because, for example, I'm not big on chants or mantras, or I don't necessarily need to hear anything, like, let's say, a bell or whatever, or do certain kinds of. For me, it's more about paying attention to the body, right? So it's about paying attention to the breath, paying attention to the heart rate, the temperatures, the this, the that, and then focus also on the mind. So it's very much a bodily thing, and then also uh, stretches and all these other kinds of things that I have to do because of scoliosis, back issues, and stuff like that. I have to be very aware of posture and stuff like that. And that awareness has helped a lot. It's like this kind of virtuous circle, if you will, virtuous cycle, of helped a lot in terms of me having to be aware. And then, so body, mind, blah, blah, blah. So, not bad. I think it's not easy. It's very obvious, but it's actually not easy. Most people, as evidenced by the fact that most people are actually dehydrated. Did you know that? Have you looked at the stats on dehydration? I mean, you would not be surprised, right? So you drink water. So you actually know the water that the body needs, right? And you watch people, right? And you notice they're not drinking water at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Now, with the water intake, for me, it is necessarily associated with activity. So that could be very ambiguous, what I just said. So I drink a lot of water when I'm working out, and I drink a lot of water when I'm podcasting, doing stuff like this. I drink water when I'm performing. A lot of water when I'm performing. I drink a lot of water when I'm prepping for a stress event. And it's interesting, for me, like this whole, um, I just have noticed that it's hard for me to separate the different aspects of myself with respect to being productive. Um, my spirit, soul, and body, right? So it's like, if I'm working out consistently, then I'm more productive in other ways also. If I'm, for instance, practicing consistently, if I'm praying consistently, if I'm attending church consistently, participating in the sacraments consistently, then I'm also more productive in other ways. It's
And if you're more
all like,
productive and you're doing both of those, then you tend to be more at peace. And if you're more at peace, you're probably kinder to people around you.
yeah,
Again, that sorting mechanism that we described earlier, where it's like, but it can't be that, but it does, how then shall we live? In a certain sense, right? It is obvious, right? In the sense that, look, things have a nature, right?
yeah,
Um, and if you allow your body to tell and your being to tell you its nature and what it's trying to do, it'll help, solve a lot of that complexity that you talked about, right? It'll help a lot, eliminate a lot of these choices as far as the path to take. It'll narrow it down. It's not that very confusing anymore about, well,
yeah,
what
yeah,
should I
yeah.
be doing, what makes me happy, and so on and so forth.
That's right. That's right. That's that first thing that we, right. That's that first thing that we kind of entered the discussion. You know, um, the simple things in, having a mastery of the simple things. It sort of uh, it makes it less sort of abstract and confusing and convoluted to complex things. I describe to my students frequently this idea that complexity in its most fundamental um, what is it? Most fundamental representation is simple. It's simplicity. It's simple. Simplicity is the wrong word. Simple, right? Simplicity is like even a second grader can describe it. That's like simplicity. Simple is like it's boiled down to its essence. Like and what that actually may imply is that you had to do all of this experimentation so that you could discover the simplest way to express something. So it actually references a lot of work. I'm doing next week I'm doing a John Coltrane show with my quartet. Dr. Thunder Quartet performs the music of John Coltrane. And John Coltrane has been tremendously influential on me in a number of ways. Not just musically, but certainly musically, but also spiritually, in his sort of ever searching and just always working on stuff, always perfecting, always constantly reinventing himself. This whole thing, I see a lot of myself. He's also a Libra. Which it's that whole thing is an interesting sort of thing, because I don't I'm not into tarot cards or into astrology or any of that, but I do believe that there's enough research data to suggest that there are similar personality traits, characteristics of people based on when they were born. That there is enough research data to suggest that there is some connection. I'm not going to go into how much of a connection, but I do believe that there is some connection. And I know a lot of Libras, and it's very interesting some of the things that we have in common. It's just as far as the way that we're oriented and the way that the kinds of things that we're interested in. And the depth that we sort of pursue that, with. But Coltrane, who grew up as a Pentecostal, kind of Pentecostal holiness, charismatic kind of a church setting in North Carolina. found himself vacillating between Christianity and Islam at the end of his life. We're not sure if he was Christian or Muslim when he passed away. So he had this sort of constant searching, even spiritually, and you see it in his music. A Love Supreme, for instance, which is one of the works that he's most recognized for, where it seems to be spelling out the liturgy, a liturgy, like in a church service. And he discovered a way to simplify all of this, enormous, heavy spiritually, heavy musically, heavy, he found a way to distill down to like its essence. And especially his later compositions, the way that he would spell out the way his melodies are composed, it's he had to do all the stuff that he did in order to get to the place where he could say it that way. So simple is not simplistic. So simple requires a certain profundity. It's just it's heavy. It's distilled. It's but it is understanding things at that simple level that makes building more simple things on top in this, creating this complexity. It's what makes that possible. And when I listen to artists that really understand how important the simple things are, when they do complex things, it still has all of that weight. Sometimes you'll hear artists that will play things that are complicated, but it doesn't have the weight. Coltrane has the weight all the time. And that's like something for everyone to learn from, something that I still am learning. But he heavy. But I'm going to be doing that concert this coming Thursday. So not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow. And that'll be a 6 to 10 show. The music of John Coltrane. It's going to be, what is it, like 3.5 hours of Coltrane. We're going to play like 24 tunes or something. So.
Just realized I'm actually 5 minutes late for this meeting that I set up.
Oh. All right. Well, I think that means that we're done. But before Bob sent $2 super chat saying I knew idiot. Astrology was BS the day I learned my sign. Great way to end.
It's StreamYard is taking its time, Bob, but I'm putting it up there. I'm giving you the round of applause. Thank you very much. Yeah, let's go ahead and end it without pomp and circumstance or ceremony or outro or anything. We will continue next week, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Dr. Thunder's channel, continuing getting ish done. The last 4 things you should know about yourself. Peace. We're out.
Peace.